Good afternoon. This is Tamara Sweeney from Love Dominates. I am here today with Dr. Marnie Hill Fodorero for the second interview. She is the author of God Came to My Garage Sale, which I highly recommend because it is a very good book that I feel everyone can relate to, with the signs and synchronicities that might have happened to you that you didn't realize. Anyway, I had to throw that in there. It helped me a lot. But today I got a lot of requests from people to do a second part to the first interview. So in the first interview, just if you haven't seen it, we basically went over the book, Marnie's book. We also went over parental alienation, domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, gaslighting. I might be forgetting some things, but that's the majority of it. But today, what we're really going to talk about is how adult children are affected by parental alienation. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to ask Marnie some questions just to get her perspective on, the adult children and how this could happen to such a child that might be 25 years old or 30 years old or 35. So let me ask you, I know you've had experience. Mm-hmm. Could you go in and talk about, it doesn't have to be your personal, but what you've learned about these adult children and how they're still caught up in that circle of, I call it domestic family terrorism, but mm-hmm. It's like narcissistic abuse?
Well, let's see. Parental alienation, a lot of times people don't even know what that is. And but once you kind of explain what the concept is, and there's different definitions, but basically it usually happens in a divorce or separation situation where one parent oftentimes has a narcissistic personality disorder, undiagnosed situation, but they are so upset and they use the children as weapons to get back and destroy their ex in any way that they can. I mean, at one point they've already taken all their money, they've already created chaos in the legal system, they've made sure that they don't have a house, that they can be homeless, that they have all their assets and money taken away. They go so far as to sometimes get support with friends and family and neighbors and get everyone to turn against this person with false accusations and half-truths, and lots of times they've been working on this for years and years and years before the separation or divorce actually happened. But anyway, these parents are actually abusing their children, these adult children even, because they get them to turn on the loving parent. And it can happen to dads and moms. It's not gender specific at all. And so that is kind of what parental alienation is. Would you explain it a little differently?
I didn't want to interrupt you. Yeah. Marnie brings up a good point about narcissism. It's undiagnosed. Mm-hmm. It's undiagnosable in my mm-hmm. mind. I mean, there is no medications, there's no cure. To me, you have to do the research of their background and how they grew up and what their behaviors were, how their parents raised them. If they were treated like a king or a queen and they can do no wrong. I mean, this is how you create that narcissistic behavior in someone. But going back to some of the tips, I want to ask you of some examples. I know in my own personal situation, I have adult children. Mine are 20, 22, 24, and 26. In my situation, the alienator ended up doing the divide and conquer, and he was doing the isolation. So they would, he got all my family, my friends, neighbors, judges, lawyers, therapists, all to sit there and say, your mom's crazy. And you know what? At the time, my children were 10, 12, 14, and 16. So if I was a child going into a doctor's office and a doctor is telling me, stay away from your mom, she's crazy, even though I was never diagnosed, this was just a premeditated plan because they were trying to put me into a mental home. And that's what people don't understand is you're this close to going into a mental home and being drugged up and silenced. That's what it's all about, because the narcissist doesn't want to be exposed. So I want to ask Marnie specifics like, did you ever see a situation or understand or have another person of parental alienation where you see this child being surrounded by all these lies and manipulations, and they can't get out. And it really, the bottom line is the narcissist doesn't want the truth to come out, and they will kick down that child. They boost them up, then they kick them down. Right. They reward them, and then they kick them down.
You know, a lot of times with parental alienation, people think it's just against the ex. But in reality, the alienators really use the children as weapons. They really, without them knowing it, kids love both their parents. They look up to both their parents. They'd like to think that both of their parents have their best interest at heart. But when it comes to, narcissist abuse, domestic violence, parental alienation, the tables turn, and the abuser, the alienator, oftentimes, they'll gaslight and they'll do terrible things to the spouse, but they'll also do this to the adult children. And, what I have found, just from my own experience, but also reading a lot about this and hearing other testimonials, that oftentimes these abusers have something to hide. They have either, it could be as simple as just hiding that they were verbally abusive to the adult child's mom or dad. It could be that. But it could also be that possibly they sexually abused this adult child when they were younger and they don't want the truth to come out. Actually, we're seeing a lot of that even in the news today, where it's just shocking, the revelations of pedophilia, and many of these abusers, men and women, are addicted to pornography. They have many extramarital affairs, relationships. They some even have families with other people when they're married to what they think is the intact primary family. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is sometimes these abusers will do whatever they can to silence these adult children because they don't want the truth of some bad wrongdoing, whether it's gambling addiction, whether it's, illegal activities, stealing money, forging names, different kinds of things. The kids might know about that and they don't want that to come out. So what they will do is they will, people think it's just gaslighting of the ex-spouse. They will actually do a lot of gaslighting to these adult children. They will make these adult children feel so bad about themselves that they are dependent on this alienator. And even though they are capable, intelligent young adults, they are made to feel that they are not.
I'm going to chime in on that one, because in my case and a lot of other cases where your kids were older, when this all happened, mine were younger. And what happens is during that trauma, the child's mind splits.
Yes.
And they stay at that age, maturity-wise. So in other words, my kids were 10, 12, 14, and 16. Their maturity level doesn't grow that much further, because that trauma has set in. It's trauma bonding. But
and the trauma is so bad that it's very hard to face it and acknowledge it. That you're in shock. It's just like, when you've experienced some sort of trauma, it takes a while for the reality of it all to sink in. And so kids of many ages, your younger kids and older kids, they don't want to face it, or they can't face it. And it's almost like a defense mechanism in the human, mind and body, that just kind of doesn't acknowledge what's happened. That's why you hear of people coming forward with accusations of sexual abuse, for example, many, many years, decades sometimes, after the fact, where the statute of limitations is over.
Sure.
And then people question whether they really experienced this or not. And most likely they did. If someone is there are instances, of course, of false allegations, and the abusers are very well versed at that. There's a lot of projection here. Like, for example, the abuser will be very condescending and verbally attack the targeted parent. Yet they will accuse that targeted parent of being condescending. And
it's a projection of everything that they think of
right,
themselves.
Right. Or they will even say, like, I've heard of one instance where a father said to his lawyer in the middle of the divorce, said something like, I wouldn't be surprised if my wife didn't accuse me of sexual abuse.
Right, he's trying to set it up.
And it's kind of like, he's,
So he's admitting it.
Right, and lots of times the evildoers do admit what they have done, but you don't catch it unless you really are paying attention. And oftentimes it is too late. But with these children, the splitting, like you said, does happen. And years, though, can go by where the adult child, even if they are up to 20 years old and they've already experienced a loving relationship with the parent, they will believe some outlandish ideas,
That's because they have that support group all chiming in and helping with the actual alienation.
And there's so much isolation. For example, the adult children, in many cases, don't even have a relationship with their siblings, because the alienator will make up excuses. Oh, that person just started a new job. They're too busy. You can't bother them right now. Or they moved across country and they're very busy.
You can pick up a phone. How can you be too busy to talk to a sibling? But
they will have all sorts of excuses where they will separate the siblings from one another. And then while they are separate, they don't want them to compare notes, because if they compared notes, they'd say, hey, mom wasn't that bad, or hey, dad wasn't that bad, whatever the situation is.
Or they'll sit there and say, mom or dad, they told me this.
Right.
And they're hearing two different stories of the same story.
Right.
Two different versions of the same story.
They can be outlandish lies. They can be half-truths where it's just partially true, but they've made up things to put it over the edge, to be accusing the other of abuse. But what I have seen happens, and it's just very, very concerning. The alienating parent will totally cross boundaries with these adult children.
They have no boundaries.
They will even call up the adult child's high school classmates or teammates, and they will say, you need to stay away from my son or my daughter right now because they've really gone through a hard time. They're suicidal right now and hospitalized, and don't help them. Well, there are lies after lies after lies.
Who does that?
The adult child would not be suicidal and might have actually gone into the hospital for an operation on their leg or something like that. I mean, and they twist it around. So they're in the hospital, but they're not in the hospital for mental health reasons or something. And then the alienators,
he's setting them up
setting
for later.
A stage, right? Yeah. And so but will actually go to the extreme of contacting old classmates that the adult child they haven't even talked to in years, but just sort of it seems strange to people, but they go ahead and accept it. But they'll set that up, or they will create scenarios where the adult child feels like the only way they can cope is to do drugs or even abuse drugs, just to numb their mind of like, what the heck is happening here? And so then one thing could lead to another, and then maybe they are admitted to a hospital for psychiatric reasons. And sometimes it is actually the alienating parent that is orchestrating that whole
that
thing.
They're the ones that are the
right, but they
have
are
mental
setting,
issues
they're
and not
setting,
the child.
right, they could be setting up a situation where,
because again, they're afraid of the truth.
right, and they want to discredit this adult child by saying, oh, they're mentally ill, they were suicidal, they're drug addicted, they can barely make it on their own, they can't hold a job. They'll say things like that so that when that adult child eventually realizes, wait a minute, I think I was sexually abused. Or wait a minute, I think I did see that forgery, and I did see someone taking all that money out of the bank. So when that actually happens and that adult child wants to speak up, he or she is already discredited because the alienator has spent months and sometimes years setting a stage to discredit this adult child. And unfortunately, this adult child, doesn't feel like they can make it on their own. They might even have money in the bank, but they're dependent on this parent to pay rent or to take them to dinner once a week or something like that, like as if they're doing such a good thing for that
handout,
child.
and then they take it back. A handout, and they take it back.
Right.
I want to cut in here real quick. There is mild, moderate, and severe alienation. We're really talking moderate to severe, because I have so many different cases that people have come up to me and actually said, whether it's a male or female, a mom or a dad, is actually poisoning my son. Like poison in the food.
Like putting drugs.
Actual poison in the child's food because they're trying to hide a secret. They want that child gone. I mean, this is how severe this could be, because it comes down to the alienator, the narcissistic personality. They have something to hide. They have a guilty conscience, and they do not want that adult child to come around and start talking. And that's why they separate the siblings. That's why they have all these different cases. I also have other cases that, the sexual abuse, where they've tried to actually murder the child, where they put a child into a mental home so that child is drugged and labeled, and they'll turn around. And these are people that are older than 30, are older than 40, older than 50 years old, that are just figuring this out now. And this is like a cult. And they're like, how can a child be so, your child's so intelligent at 18 or whatever.
Right.
But really, they're not. Their minds are not developed until 25, especially boys.
And lots of times, unfortunately, with these alienated adult children that have gone years and years without a relationship with their loving parent, oftentimes the primary caregiver that was always there for them. Oftentimes it takes until they have their own children and they realize that they married someone very similar to the abuser, and what happened to them, what's happening to them now actually is what happened to them younger. So that they're putting the pieces together, but they could be way into midlife when all of a sudden you realize, wow, now I'm seeing it for what it really is. And what's so very hard here is that these children are being damaged and
they're being manipulated, completely manipulated, and the courts get involved and make it worse by saying your father or your mother is mentally ill, and we're gonna. First of all, why do you need a psych evaluation? Before the divorce, there was no problem. All of a sudden, after the divorce, you need a psych evaluation, and you're a bad parent.
And there's a whole nother, and I know you've done a lot of videos on just the court corruption and how the judges and the lawyers and the guardian ad litem's and the therapists,
there's incentives for them to destroy your
financial
family.
incentives, and that's why you even see it played out in our politics and in our world today. Justice does not always prevail. There's a lot of corruption and a lot of people. Right. There's a lot of corruption, and in my case, I never had to deal with custody and all of that, but I do deal with and continue to have to deal with an abuser using the legal system. When they can't control you, and you're strong enough to know your truth and realize that no, you are a good person and you don't
worthy.
deserve this. It didn't take two to make this situation dissolve. It actually is one very demonic individual that in fact, Deb Harmon, I think, is one of those great researchers out of Colorado, where she does talk about the difference between
you mean Jen Harmon?
Is it Jen Harmon? Jen
Dr.
Harmon.
Jen Harmon.
Okay,
She's
Jen Harmon.
Incredible.
Yes, and but she talks about how really it's one alienator, one abuser that is setting the stage and creating the chaos. And oftentimes those are the people that continue to take their ex to court over this and that, and they make up things. They will twist facts, and they'll get very narcissistic and corrupt lawyers to corroborate with them, and so they just won't ever let go and move on with their life, even if they married someone else. And in my case, I think my ex is with our next door neighbor or something like that. I mean,
which they probably were the whole time.
Right. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I don't really care, but the reality is that they don't move on in their lives because their need to destroy and create chaos and make your life miserable doesn't end with a divorce decree, or doesn't end with a custody battle, or it just keeps on going
They
and going
need to
and
create
going.
the chaos so that no one can figure them out.
Right.
And that is the
very
key here.
complicated. Very complicated situation.
We're at 2222.
Okay.
There's a sign in synchronicity
yes,
there.
there is. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to try to sum this up in a sense for the adult children, especially if you're an adult child watching this right now. Ask yourself some questions. Are you independent? And what I mean by independent, do you pay your own bills? Do you have your own job? You're not working for a parent, that other alienated parent. Who controls or who pays for your rent? Who pays for your car?
Or cell phones.
Cell phones.
I mean,
everything.
and you might even want to do, as an adult child, you might even want to do a little checking as to whether there are tracking devices on your computer that the abuser most likely paid for and controls. See if there's tracking devices on your phone and even your vehicle that you drive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good especially
point.
If they are involved in paying for your insurance and all of that stuff. Look for tracking devices. So these adult children, like you're saying, ask yourself if you really are feeling independent. Are you free to have a relationship with the family of the alienated, targeted parents?
And if not, why?
Yeah, why?
What is the cause? What is the tension there? Here's the thing. If you really want to live life and be independent and feel good about yourself, then I'm not saying be rude or obnoxious to that parent that you're aligned with, but just quietly go out on your own and say, I want to be out on my own now. Mm-hmm. And get your own apartment, get your own job, get your own phone, your own
actually
car,
be careful.
Your own insurance.
I would say also be careful with how much you share with that abusing parent, because I have known abusers to contact an adult child's workplace and tell that workplace that their son or daughter has emotional issues and can't be at work, or look out for this or that. It's almost like when
they're successful, they knock them down.
Right. But what a invasion of privacy to have an abusing parent, contact your workplace and coordinate things. There are many adult children that lose their jobs and they don't know what they did, but many of them, that parent was in contact with that.
Well, that's where
workplace.
the control sets in, where that alienator will sit there and say to their son or daughter, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It just wasn't meant to be. Maybe next time you'll have better luck." They are so afraid that you're, number one, going to be smarter than them, that you're going to be more successful than them, and they don't want that, and they don't want the truth to come out. So,
and in addition to that, one sign, if we're talking to the alienated children right now, the children that are starting to think, wait a minute, there's something, I've heard the term parental alienation, I do have this other parent that I always loved and they always loved me, but they did some terrible things, so I don't want a relationship with them at all, cutting it off completely. You may want to also think as when you're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, does this alienating parent ever compare you to someone else? Do they ever say, well, you're just not as advanced as other people from your high school class or your age. Boy, your cousin or the neighbor the neighbor next door, they are in a successful career making, $150,000 a year, and look at you're just making minimum wage. So the alienator will oftentimes
degrade
them, and they'll do it in a way that they think is supportive, but at the same time they're comparing and putting their own child down and not building them up, so that their self-concept is down. And then you have this whole COVID, isolation situation thrown into their own isolation situation, which actually happened most likely before. So then you've got this adult child that has no outlet, no supports. They don't know what to do. They don't want to, they want a relationship with both parents. And actually, I think it's important to have a relationship with both parents. You just need to know what you're dealing with and plan and conduct yourself accordingly. It doesn't mean that you can't, it doesn't, I'd like to say that
independent thinker.
There's definitely an independent thinker syndrome or phenomenon where the adult child says, well, it's my other parent never said anything bad about this parent. I just know I want nothing to do with them, but they never said anything bad, and
they encouraged me to be with that.
Right.
Yeah, this is how good the alienator is.
So they get the adult child to think it was their idea that they separated, when really research for years and years has shown that there is no basis for a child to reject a loving parent. Now, if a child was seriously abused, then there could be reason, if they were abandoned, whatever. But in most of the cases, there is no basis. It goes against all human nature for a child or an adult child to reject another parent. And also in alienated children, I would recommend checking out Dr. Craig Childress. So Dr. Craig Childress, he has a 9-part video series that's directed specifically for the adult children. Each segment is only 10 minutes long or something like that. That would be, if you are
a good start.
If you are thinking, wait a minute, I need to learn a little bit more about parental alienation, even though I'm 25, 30, 35, whatever your age is, check out Dr. Craig Childress's 9-part video series directed at the alienated child. He's a very technical, scientist, psychiatrist. So sometimes you can get lost with all the technical jargon, but that particular video series directed at the adult children is something that you would really be able to understand. It explains the phenomenon of parental alienation and what it really is about. And then go ahead and say something else.
Well, I really wanted to end this with the adult child by saying, just know, please know that other parent loves you, the rejected parent. There might be some situations where it could be different, whatever. But in situations of parental alienation, I can almost guarantee that other parent that has been the rejected parent or the targeted parent, whatever you want to call, that parent loves you. So please, please don't have that fear to reach out, because I can guarantee you that parent is going to leave their arms open for you. They want to listen to your side of the story. They want to hear what you've gone through, and they want to help you so bad, just to be able to be dependent and be able to be your own person. I'm sorry, independent. I don't know why I say that all the time, but they want you to be independent, to have your own life, to live your own journey, your own spiritual journey. You're a special person. You are special, and both your mom and dad love you. Unfortunately, you got caught up in this nightmare of divorce, and one parent is acting childish. And
it's even more than that. Yeah, I was going to say they're malevolent. I mean, they've got really...
It's intentional.
It's intentional, and they're using you.
And don't be embarrassed that you have a parent that way. Yeah. It is what it is.
Right.
It's better to be honest. It's better to be upfront and to face, these issues that you might have in your family.
And actually, most of the time, the targeted parent, when they start to realize that there's something going on with this child, and they think, oh, it'll go away in a week or two, and then it's a month, and then it's years and years. In my case, I've been alienated 6 years plus, and yours is 10 years. So years and years can go by. And, unfortunately, oftentimes the alienator will encourage you to file legal suits against that parent so that legally they can't contact you. But chances are, for at least a long period of time, that parent tried to reach out to you with cards, letters, gifts, phone calls, and
I have all those examples on my YouTube channel of walking up to the door and trying to give gifts, and the alienator's like, oh, I encourage the kids to see you, but he calls the cops right away.
Right. Or
and
has
me thrown out.
Or he takes your gifts and photos and throws them away.
Outside.
Just gets rid of them. So unfortunately, to the alienated children, your loving parent will welcome you with open arms. Of course, it's going to have to be a process, and trust needs to be restored and all of that. But the loving bond
doesn't have to be uncomfortable.
No, the
Give
loving
each other
bond.
A hug.
Yeah, the loving bond. You got to start somewhere. The loving bond is always, it's been established from early on, and so that is still there. The love and the bond is still there. The thing is, the targeted parent, after so much rejection and then possible legal consequences, if they were to reach out to you, has silenced them. And that's what abusers do. They want to silence and just cut off any kind of communication. So I would say it's up to you. I mean, it's not totally up to you, but you really could be the one to make the initiation and make the first step and make the phone call or write a letter or something like that.
Also, you could, just so you know, you have to be smart about it. You can come up with a plan, and don't tell anyone, and just reach out to that parent, because there are, like I said, it's severe alienation, and then there's some mild. The ones that are severe,
well, there's a lot of fear.
There's a lot of fear there deep down that you don't know. But what I'm worried about is a child. It might trigger something, because a child, when they were young, saw that parent kick that other parent out of their life, and they saw what they did to that other parent. So they might be afraid that if they reach out, that aligned parent is going to do the same to them.
Right. Yeah.
Number one, if they do, oh well, the truth came out, and now you're set free.
But there's also that Stockholm Syndrome, which we've talked about in that previous video, where that was that bank robbery situation where the bank tellers actually aligned and they supported the
Criminals.
the robbers, because they just were empathetic to their plight and their situation, when really they were the ones causing the trauma and doing the bad things. So alienated children, now is the time, especially after everything that we all have been through in this past year, now is the time for you to reach out to your targeted parent, the one that loves you so much, and make that connection. And you know, try to figure it out, and don't be afraid of losing that other parent's love. You really, there's room for both parents to love you, and for you to have both parents in your life.
Here's and you can probably relate to this because it's going on in the world right now, is if you're watching the news, the fake news, you notice that the bad guys, we'll call them the bad guys, I don't know what to call them, are giving out false information. They're giving out lies.
And censoring people.
And silencing people. And that's exactly what happened in your own family. Like,
right.
That one parent was silenced and tossed out like a piece of trash. Sort of like you'll hear all these stories about people that were speaking the truth about what's going on in family courts, what's going on in the government, period, Hollywood, all this stuff. The truth tellers get silenced. The good-hearted people get trampled on. And they're trying to do the best that they can to get to help people, because that's what we do.
Right. And the alienators oftentimes just buy off the court systems, buy off the legal people. They can even buy
They put
off
the criminals in powerful positions.
Right.
Happens.
And it's not that the targeted parent doesn't want to buy you a gift or this or that, but they also want to teach you to be independent. But anyway, I know we need to wrap this up.
Yeah, we gotta go.
But
it's long.
Yeah, it is. But it's an important topic. It's important that we take time to talk about this. And I had no idea where this was going to go today. But to the alienated children, you know, it's time. It's time for you to connect with that other parent, that mom or dad that you stopped having a relationship. It's also time to connect again with your sibling, because probably something you were told about that
or
sibling
grandparents or
was wrong.
Family,
right?
You know, because
right.
You could start with,
you have aunts and uncles
with the grandparents,
right?
or
You have aunts and uncles that love
and
you.
then trickle back to your parent.
Also, I would like to, I'm sure you would be open to this, but you could always contact Love Dominates, and you could reach out to this.
I could be that go-to person.
Right.
For
you could reach out and say, listen, I do want to connect with my parent, or I do want to connect with my grandparent, whoever it is you're alienated with. What's the first start, or can you make the call for me because I'm too scared to, or whatever. You can get support in doing this.
Yes.
And
just so you know, I mediate or whatever. I'm not a coach. I'm not a licensed therapist by any means. I'm just an experienced parent of alienation.
Right.
And I'm here for the love of the child and that family, because you can still be one family. And you don't have to be alienated. There's only one person that's causing this problem, and usually the person that you're aligned with. So if that person is a complete narcissist and will not work,